I was never a nervous traveler. Even back in our mid-20s, when we barely had enough money for gas and snacks, I still felt safer on the road than I ever did walking alone at night back home. There was something so freeing about it. Windows down, music up, the wind rushing through the car as the landscape blurred past. The road always felt like the safest place to be, or so I thought, until that night. It was the summer of 2014, and my best friend Nora and I had planned a 10-day trip from Kansas City all the way to San Diego. We'd mapped a route with pit stops in Denver, Moab, Vegas, and finally the coast. We'd done a few short trips before, weekends to Nashville or Austin, but this was our big one. A kind of last hurrah before real life locked us down with jobs and rent. Things we didn't want to think about yet. We left on a Friday morning, the sun already high in that kind of blue sky you only get in the Midwest. Nora's older brother's beat-up silver Hyundai Elantra was our ride for the week. No air conditioning, a missing hubcap, and a weird smell in the back seat we chose to ignore. But it ran. By the time we hit the Colorado state line, the sun was setting. Orange streaks flaring across the sky like some painter got too enthusiastic with a brush. Our plan was to spend the night in a cheap motel in Grand Junction before heading into Utah the next day. It was just before 9:00 p.m. when we pulled off I-70 near a little place called Halpern Springs, which wasn't even a real town, just a gas station, a diner, and a couple of trailers off the highway. We stopped to refuel, stretch our legs, and switch drivers. I'd been behind the wheel for hours and was half delirious from Red Bulls and trail mix. The gas station had that lonely, too quiet feel that only comes out after dark in places no one cares about. The only light came from the buzzing fluorescence overhead and the flickering neon open sign in the window. I noticed another car at the far pump, a dull green Jeep Liberty with a Colorado plate, and two girls our age standing next to it, talking and laughing as they filled up. It was a quick, meaningless observation you forget 2 minutes later, or usually you do. But parked one lane over was a black pickup truck, big, old, and loud, the kind that roars when it starts. The guy behind the wheel looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, with tan skin, a scruffy beard, and a worn baseball cap. Nothing too unusual until I noticed he wasn't getting gas or moving. He was just sitting there, staring through his windshield directly at the girls. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but when I stepped out to stretch, his eyes were fixed on them, unblinking, following their every move. It was so blatant it made my skin crawl. I nudged Nora, still in the passenger seat. "Do you see that guy?" I whispered. She followed my gaze, her eyebrows knitting together. "Yeah, that's weird." We both watched for a few more seconds until the guy suddenly leaned back and started his engine. The truck idled for a second, then rumbled forward, slowly pulling around the side of the building and out of sight. "Let's go inside," I said, trying to keep my voice even. We grabbed some snacks, water bottles, protein bars, a couple bags of chips, and went up to pay. The cashier was a woman in her 50s with heavy eyeliner, smoking behind the counter like it was still allowed. "You girls driving through?" she asked, bagging our stuff. "Yeah," Nora said, headed to Utah. "Stick to the highway," the woman muttered, lighting another cigarette. "Don't stop in Castle Ridge. Cops are crooked. Had a girl go missing there last month. A backpacker. They never found her." She said it so casually. It felt like she was warning us about bad food instead of a missing person. Back outside, the Jeep was gone. The lot was empty. I climbed into the passenger seat and checked my phone. 1 bar of signal. Nora got behind the wheel, turned the key, and we pulled back onto the road. We hadn't gone more than 5 minutes down the highway when we saw them again. The green Jeep was maybe half a mile ahead of us in the right lane, and the pickup was behind them, too close, tailgating so hard that its headlights lit up the inside of the Jeep like a spotlight. "What the hell is he doing?" Nora asked, leaning forward. I watched as the pickup jerked into the left lane, then sped up to ride alongside the girls. The driver had his window down and was yelling something across to them. The girls looked panicked, one on her phone, the other gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. He's trying to get them to stop, I said. Sure enough, the Jeep's turn signal flicked on. They were slowing down, pulling toward the shoulder. No, no, no. I muttered, don't stop. Please don't stop. The pickup hit the brakes too, but something must have spooked him. Maybe he saw us coming up behind. Maybe he didn't expect witnesses, because just as the Jeep rolled to a halt, the truck roared forward and sped off down the interstate. We pulled in right behind the girls. Nora hit the hazards, and we both jumped out. The two women, one blonde, one with a high ponytail, looked shaken. He said he was a cop. The blonde stammered as we approached. Said we were swerving, and he had to pull us over, but he didn't have a badge or anything. He just started shouting out of his window. Said if we didn't pull over, we'd go to jail. He's not a cop, I said. We saw him at the gas station. He was watching you. They both looked like they were about to cry. The one with the ponytail, Jessie, she said her name was, nodded and whispered, thank you. I think we would have pulled over if you hadn't been behind us. We stayed with them for a few minutes, exchanged numbers, and promised to follow each other until the next rest stop. They contacted the police from there, gave descriptions, plates, the whole bit. We didn't stick around long after. Something about the encounter made everything feel off, like we'd stared at something truly evil, and it had stared back. Back in the car, we didn't talk much. I think we both realized how close it had been. For them, for us. That was the only time on the trip anything went really wrong, but it changed us. For the rest of the drive, we only traveled in daylight. No more late night highways, no more empty gas stations. We kept pepper spray in the front cup holder and locked the doors at every stop. When we got back to Kansas City, I didn't tell my parents. Nora didn't tell hers. We didn't want them to worry, but that story never really left us. Over the years, we drifted. Life does that. Jobs, relationships, different cities. But every so often, we find ourselves back home at the same time. And when we meet for drinks, there's always a moment, just one, when the laughter fades and someone brings it up again. The guy in the pickup, the headlights, the look on those girls' faces. And we all go quiet because we know how different things could have been. We were lucky, but someone else out there wasn't. And sometimes when I'm driving alone and the road ahead is empty, I still check my rear-view mirror just in case. I wasn't planning on going home that weekend. In fact, I'd been avoiding it, not because I didn't miss my family, I did, painfully so, but because home meant obligation, emotional weight, conversations I wasn't ready to have. I was 22, finishing my last year at the University of Northern Utah, and I just started to feel like I was standing on my own 2 feet. But all of that came crashing down with one phone call. It was a Thursday night around 11:20 p.m. I just finished a late cram session in the campus library, trying to prep for a molecular biology midterm. My phone buzzed in my hoodie pocket, and when I saw Mom light up on the screen, I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hey, I said, my voice tired. Her voice was shaking. Sophie, it's Grandpa. He's in the hospital. They think it might be soon, like this weekend. I didn't say anything at first, just let the silence hang between us. My stomach dropped. Grandpa Ray had practically raised me while my mom worked double shifts as a nurse. He was tough, gentle, and had a laugh that could make you forget your problems for a minute. I'll come home, I finally said, my heart pounding. I didn't want to pressure you, she started. You're not. I'll pack and leave tonight. I'll be there by morning. It was a 9-hour drive from Logan, Utah, to my family's home in a small California desert town called Twin Rivers, just past the Nevada border. I'd done the drive before, usually with friends or broken into chunks, but this time would be solo. Just me, the road, and too many thoughts. 1:12 a.m. on the road. I'd packed light, Just a backpack with a change of clothes, my laptop, and a couple of snacks. My old Jeep Liberty groaned as I pulled onto the dark highway, headlights stretching ahead into black nothingness. The roads were empty, just the occasional trucker or set of red taillights in the distance. I kept the windows cracked and the radio low, AUK radio, the kind that plays interviews and true crime stories. It helped keep my brain focused, keep me awake. Somewhere past the Utah-Nevada border, the landscape flattened into a sea of sand and low shrubs, the kind of place that felt untouched by time. There was a gas station I always stopped at about 6 hours in, Rusty Joe's, just outside of a ghost town called Silverbend. It was one of those places with faded paint, humming neon signs, and old vending machines that looked like they hadn't worked since 1995. It was also my last reliable stop before hitting a stretch of desert highway with no signal, no lights, and no real civilization for the next 100 miles. 5:47 a.m. Rusty Joe's gas and go. The sky was just starting to fade into a bruised lavender. My eyes were heavy, but adrenaline and a gas station Red Bull had me functional. I pulled into the station, killed the engine, and stepped out into the chill air. The place looked deserted as usual. A single flickering light illuminated Pump 4 where I parked. Inside the Minimart, a tired old man stood behind the counter watching an ancient box TV with static lines running through it. "Morning," I said, grabbing a coffee. He gave me a grunt, not even looking away from the screen. I used the bathroom, came back out, and sat on my hood, sipping the coffee, trying to psych myself up for the last leg of the drive. Then habit kicked in. I'd been concealed carrying ever since an incident in Salt Lake a year earlier. My dad had helped me get the permits, but California didn't allow it, so I always disassembled and locked it up in a case before crossing the state line. So I opened my trunk, knelt down, and started breaking down the handgun, carefully and methodically like I'd done a dozen times before. What I didn't know was that someone was watching me. 6:04 a.m. The grab. I stood up, stretched my arms, turned to toss the empty coffee cup in the trash, and that's when it happened. An arm around my chest tight, another at my mouth before I could scream. I thrashed instinctively, but he was strong, bigger than me. He smelled like old sweat and leather and something metallic, maybe blood. My feet left the ground and I felt like a rag doll in his grip. I tried to scream again, but it came out muffled. I twisted my neck, bit down on his hand, and he cursed loud, dropping me for just a second. I hit the gravel and kicked backward, trying to scramble under the Jeep. He caught my ankle, and I thought, this is it. This is how women disappear. I clawed at the gravel, my palms bleeding, and I screamed again, this time loud, primal, from the pit of my stomach. The sound echoed into the open desert, then tires fast screeching. A red sedan, a junky Honda Civic, pulled into the lot like it was trying to outrun something. 4 teens spilled out, wearing hoodies and pajama pants, probably headed back from a party or sunrise hike. "Hey," one of them yelled, "let her go." The man took off, no hesitation, just dropped my ankle and ran like an animal into the desert. 2 of the boys chased after him, one even tossing a rock. The other 2 rushed to me. "Are you okay?" the girl asked, kneeling beside me. I don't know," I gasped. "I think, yeah. Holy shit, you're bleeding," said the boy. "We're calling 911. He handed me a water bottle and let me lean against the passenger side door. I was shaking, couldn't stop, couldn't even hold the bottle properly. The girl, Rachel, sat next to me and put a hoodie over my shoulders. I didn't know her, but I think I'll always remember her eyes. So calm, so grounded. When the sheriff's deputy finally arrived, a local guy named Darrell, I couldn't give a full description. Just pieces, white male, maybe 6 feet, sunburned skin, heavy boots, no vehicle, no obvious weapon. They searched, found nothing, not even footprints they could track in the hard, packed sand. The 2 boys who chased him said he vanished into a dry wash near the back end of the lot. But I know what I felt, and I know how close I came to being just another missing person poster. I made it home to see Grandpa. He was weak, but he squeezed my hand and told me he was proud. He died 3 days later. I never told my mom what happened at the gas station. Never told anyone, really, except the police. I didn't want her to worry, but that moment, that sheer helplessness, changed me. For months, I couldn't sleep without seeing those arms around me again. Couldn't stop hearing that low grunt, that sour breath against my ear. And most of all, I couldn't stop thinking about how lucky I'd been. Because if that Honda Civic had pulled in 30 seconds later, I wouldn't be here writing this. I drove out to the same spot once. I don't know why, maybe to reclaim it, maybe to make peace with it. Rusty Joe's was still there, still dusty, still buzzing with old neon. I didn't get out this time, just parked, watched the sun rise. Then I sent 4 texts to the numbers I had saved from that night. Just a simple, thank you. I'm still here because of you. Only one replied, always stay safe out there. And I swear I've never cried harder in my life. I never used to be scared of driving at night. I actually liked it. The peace, the quiet roads, no honking, no tailgating, just me, my music, and the road stretching endlessly ahead. That was before that night. Before I found out what it really feels like to be utterly alone and completely helpless. It started like any other road trip I'd taken. I was helping my friend Lauren move from one small town to another, Linden to Maple Hollow, 2 nowhere towns in a rural corner of southern Texas. She'd flown ahead to meet the landlord and get the keys, and I'd volunteered to drive her car down with a few boxes and her cat in the back seat. It was supposed to be easy. I'd done long solo drives before, but not like this. Not through pitch-black winding roads with no cell signal in the middle of a thunderstorm in a car that already had a busted passenger side lock. That part was important later. The route was straightforward at first, an hour on the interstate, then another hour or so on a 2-lane highway. But somewhere between Refiner's Ridge and Maple Hollow, I missed a turn. The signs were few, and the ones I did see were half faded, rusted over, or knocked crooked. I pulled off at a gas station around 8:30 to ask for directions. An old man behind the counter said I could either turn around and take the longer way back, or cut through the back roads and save some time. I should have taken the long way. I really should have. But I was tired, I was behind schedule, and the shortcut sounded convenient. The back road started out paved but quickly turned to dirt, then gravel, then something halfway between mud and loose rock. And then it started raining. Not a sprinkle either, but pouring like sheets of water crashing down from every direction. I couldn't see 10 feet in front of me. The windshield wipers were on full blast, but it didn't help. My headlights lit up only the endless downpour. I slowed down to 30, then 20, then 15. Even with high beams, everything looked the same. Thick woods on either side, no lights, no houses, no turnoffs, no cell signal. That's when the fear started to creep in. Nothing dramatic. Just a low-level buzz in my chest, a sense of being far away from help. I told myself I just needed to find the next road sign, one clear marker, anything to tell me I wasn't just looping endlessly. I spotted something up ahead, a battered green sign on a metal pole. I squinted through the storm, slowing to a crawl. The letters were barely legible through the rain. I figured I could pull over and lean toward the windshield to get a better look. There was no shoulder, so I just stopped as close to the side as I could, hazard lights blinking red in the rain, soaked dark. I didn't want to step out into the storm, so I leaned way over the center console, craning my neck forward, wiping at the foggy glass with my sleeve. That's when it happened. The passenger side door swung open. At first I thought maybe the wind had caught it, but no, someone was there. A man, drenched, clothes plastered to his skin, was grabbing at the inside handle, trying to pull himself into the seat. And just like that, my whole body locked into panic mode. Hey, get out. I screamed, my voice cracking, hands fumbling over the gear shift. He didn't say a word. He didn't ask for help, didn't apologize. He just kept climbing in like he had every right to be there. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires skidded but finally caught the mud, flinging rocks behind me as the car lunged forward. The guy lost his grip and stumbled back into the rain. The door flapped open beside me, slamming into the wind. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just drove. Mud flew. Trees blurred past. The rain roared. The passenger door was still wide open. Every time I hit a bump, it bounced. I kept waiting for another hand to reach out of the dark and grab the frame again. My whole body was shaking. I was gasping, not breathing, gasping. My heart felt like it was trying to crawl out of my throat. Finally, after maybe 2 minutes, maybe 30 seconds, it felt eternal. I risked leaning over and grabbing the door handle. It took 2 tries, but I managed to slam it shut. And then I just kept driving. No music, no talking, no GPS. Just the sound of the rain and my shallow breaths and the thrum of the tires. Eventually, I made it to a real road again, then a town, then the house Lauren was moving into. She ran out to greet me, smiling, asking how the drive was. I got out of the car and threw up on the driveway. I didn't tell her what happened until days later, not in full. I didn't want to scare her, but I knew deep down something was wrong about that man. He wasn't some lost hitchhiker. He hadn't waved me down, hadn't knocked on the window, hadn't shouted. He just tried to get in silently, like he knew I'd stop there, like he'd been waiting. I called the local sheriff's office the next day just to report it, not really expecting anything. But the deputy I spoke to got quiet when I described what road I was on. "You said Oak Hollow Trail, right?" he asked. "Yeah." Long pause. "You're not the first to call about someone like that. Similar descriptions, same road, always rainy nights." My stomach dropped. "You ever catch him?" "Never got close," the deputy said. "We've patrolled it. Nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone walking, but we believe the reports. Locals call that stretch the Phantom Mile. It's got a history. I don't know what he meant by history. And honestly, I don't want to know. All I know is that I don't drive at night anymore. Especially not alone. Especially not through the woods. Especially not in the rain. And if I ever do find myself on a dark road with no signal and a sign I can't read, I'll keep driving no matter what." I never really thought the sound of tires on wet tarmac could bring comfort, but out there, surrounded by nothing but the hum of the engine and the quiet breathing of 3 sleeping mates, it almost felt like a heartbeat, familiar, steady, something to focus on while the world stretched out in black silence. We were somewhere between Pitlochry and Stirling when the last bit of phone signal vanished and the rain picked up. Not a downpour, just that slow, irritating drizzle that clings to your windscreen no matter how fast the wipers go. It had been a long day. Hell, it had been a long month. See, growing up in Corriburn, a half-forgotten speck tucked between hills in the Scottish Highlands, does things to a person. When I say tiny, I don't mean charming postcard tiny. I mean claustrophobic. 2 farms, a community hall that doubled as a post office on Tuesdays, 5 houses, and 1 groaning old pub that hadn't had a license since before we were born. That was it. That was Corriburn. The nearest shop that sold anything beyond tin peas was an hour away, and the only bus out ran twice a day. Once at 6:00 in the morning, and again when the driver remembered. If you missed it, tough, you were staying in Corriburn. So for kids like me, Richie, Dean, and Finn, escape wasn't just a fantasy. It was a necessity, a hunger. We lived for weekends, saved every coin we could scrape from part-time jobs, stacking hay, gutting fish, delivering coal, dreaming of the day when someone, anyone, would get a car. And I did. A battered little Vauxhall Corsa I found on Gumtree. 3 doors, rust blooming under the wheel arches, an aux cord permanently stuck in the jack. My dad surprised me with it on my 17th, saying, "If you can keep this heap alive, you can go wherever you bloody want." He had no idea how much that meant. We started small, Fort William, Oban, the occasional trip to Inverness to stuff our faces with dominoes and loiter outside pubs, hoping for a chance pint. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. The world was bigger and we needed to see it. So we started planning something mad, something bold. Let's drive to London, Dean had said one night, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor, a rolled-up road atlas between us. Just us, summer, windows down, music up. 1 week, no parents. It sounded like magic. It sounded like freedom. We spent weeks mapping the route, looking up cheap motels, setting aside cash. The plan was simple. Drive from Corriburn to Birmingham on day 1, cut the trip in half, crash at a travel inn, then make the last leg to London the next morning, stay a few days, do whatever the hell we wanted, and then crawl back north. We left on a Tuesday, clear skies, music blaring, our backpacks stuffed with snacks and deodorant, and not nearly enough clean underwear. The plan was solid, the vibes immaculate, and everything was perfect. At first, we'd made it to just outside Birmingham, way ahead of schedule. Spirits were high until we got to the travel inn. We'd been so sure we'd be fine booking on arrival. Who books ahead in the off-season? Well, everyone, apparently. Sorry, lads, completely full tonight, the receptionist said, her eyes flicking between our tired faces and Richie's banana print shirt like she wasn't sure if we were joking. The next 3 hours were a blur of empty lobbies, apologetic shrugs, and neon no vacancy signs. Eventually, we gave up. We'd park at a 24-hour service station off the M6, tilt the seats back and sleep. We were in the middle of a massive, mostly empty lorry park. It was dimly lit, surrounded by thick trees. A couple of articulated trucks were idling at the far end, engines rumbling low. We parked under the one working light and killed the engine. Everyone passed out pretty fast, except me. I sat for a while, watching the rain smear down the windshield, the occasional flicker of distant headlights. The quiet crept in slowly, that kind of silence that isn't really silent, just full of everything you'd rather not hear. The ticking of the engine cooling my breath, the faint buzz of the fluorescent light. Somewhere between dozing off and dreaming, I felt a hand shaking me. It was Dean. Oi, Logan, I need to take a slash. My name's Logan McCree, by the way. Should have said that sooner. Our Corsa was a 3-door, so I had to clamber out for him to get through. He slipped off into the dark edges of the lot, muttering something about bushes. I sat on the damp curb, rubbing sleep from my eyes half, listening to the hiss of trucks and an occasional bird call. Then came the sound. A snap, like a branch, then rustling, fast, heavy, then Dean running, sprinting full tilt from the trees. His face was wild, pale, panicked. Start the car, start the car, start the fucking car. I froze for a split second, confused. Was this a joke? Was he messing around? He wasn't. Something was moving in the trees behind him. Quick, unnatural. We peeled out of that car park like we were being chased by the devil. I didn't even get a proper look at what it was. I just remember shapes, movement, a feeling in my gut like something cold had reached into me and twisted. Dean didn't speak for a long time. None of us did, until we were 30 miles down the motorway, parked at a petrol station bathed in sodium light. I thought it was a dog. He finally whispered, but it stood up. It stood on 2 legs. It watched me. I could hear it breathing like he didn't finish. We told ourselves it was exhaustion, hallucinations, shadows playing tricks on tired eyes. But over the next 2 days, things got worse. Everywhere we stopped, we started noticing things. A white van with no plates that seemed to keep appearing in different car parks. A man with a limp and a long coat who we swore we saw twice. Once in a petrol station near Milton Keynes, then again outside a chip shop in Watford. Exact same man, same limp, same vacant stare. Richie swore he woke up in the middle of the night and saw someone watching us from a hedge. All hunched, unmoving. Our road trip started to unravel. None of us were sleeping. We were snapping at each other, paranoid, jumpy. The car, our safe little capsule, began to feel like a trap. The final straw came in a lay-by north of London. We pulled over to rest. It was meant to be a 10-minute break. Finn never came back. We searched everywhere. The woods, the ditches, every inch. Nothing. No signs, no sounds. His bag was still in the car, his phone dead in the footwell. We called the police, of course, told them he must have wandered off sleepwalking. We didn't mention the van, or the thing in the trees, or the feeling all of us had been carrying since that night outside Birmingham, that we were being hunted. They searched for days. We stayed in a nearby hostel, sick with guilt, terror, confusion. They never found him. None of us talk anymore. Dean moved to New Zealand. Richie joined the army. I stayed in Corriburn. Haven't driven south since. Sometimes I see that white van just at the edge of the village, parked by the tree line. I never get close. I just go back inside and lock the doors. And sometimes on quiet nights I still hear the breath, low, wet, right behind me. I never liked long drives, but it was my best friend Brandon's idea. Road trip to kick off the summer before we all drifted apart for good. There were 4 of us, me, Brandon, his girlfriend Kayla, and her younger cousin Jenna. We'd been talking about it for weeks, and the plan was to drive from our little town of Fairford, Kentucky, all the way out to Crescent Bay, California. A 2-week cross-country ride filled with national parks, campgrounds, weird roadside attractions, and all the junk food we could stomach. We left on the morning of June 9th, 2019. I remember the way the sun hit the cracked pavement of Brandon's old silver Jeep Cherokee as we loaded up our bags. My mom gave me the usual warnings: don't drive tired, don't trust strangers, keep your phone charged. But there was an extra edge in her voice that morning, like she knew something I didn't. The first few days were perfect. We cut through Missouri, then Kansas, and camped out near Lake Wilson. The weather was warm but not miserable, and the skies stayed clear. Brandon handled most of the driving, and I helped him navigate. Kayla was our unofficial DJ, and Jenna kept a journal of every weird little detail, like the man at the rest stop who stared at us too long, or the gas station with the taxidermy bear in the bathroom. By June 12th, we hit the New Mexico border and decided to stop overnight in a town called Azure Springs. It wasn't on the map initially. We'd pulled off the highway for gas and saw the sign. The place had an old-time charm, wooden storefronts, a single blinking street light, and a general store that looked untouched since the 50s. Jenna thought it was cute. Kayla joked that it looked like a movie set. I thought it looked like a place people went missing. We checked into the only motel in town, the Desert Palms Lodge. The manager was a thin, leathery man with sun-faded tattoos and a habit of staring too long at Kayla. He handed us a single key on a heavy brass ring and told us, "Try not to wander too far after dark." That night, over sandwiches and chips in our room, Brandon mentioned he wanted to find an old friend who lived nearby, someone he hadn't seen since high school, Liam something. I didn't know the guy, but Brandon swore he lived just 20 minutes out of town. Jenna offered to stay behind, saying she wanted to write in her journal. Kayla wasn't letting Brandon go alone, so that left me. We drove out on a dusty side road just after 8:30 p.m. The air smelled like hot tar and desert brush. I remember asking Brandon if he was sure about the directions, and he said he had a pin dropped on his phone, but the deeper we went, the worse the signal got. We never did find the house. What we found instead was a rusted signpost with no lettering, half buried in sand, and a side trail that didn't appear on any map. Brandon, against all logic, turned onto it. The trail led to a broken fence and the remnants of what looked like a ranch house, long abandoned. It was pitch black by then, the only light coming from our high beams and the moon hanging thin and sharp in the sky. We should have turned around, but Brandon got out of the Jeep, saying, "I swear this was it. I remember that tree, the fence too." Kayla shouted after him, but he was already walking toward the house. That was the last moment of normalcy. Inside the house, everything was wrong. The air was cold and still, and the smell it was like rotting meat soaked in copper. The furniture was covered in sheets, but there were footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. We heard a sound from the back room. Brandon called out, thinking it was Liam. What we saw instead was a man, thin, shirtless, covered in grime, standing in the shadows with something glinting in his hand. He didn't move, just stood there staring. We ran. Outside, we jumped back in the Jeep and peeled out of there so fast we nearly flipped. Brandon was shaking. Kayla was sobbing. Neither of us said anything the whole drive back. By the time we got to the motel, it was past midnight. Jenna was gone. Her journal was still on the bed. Her phone was plugged in. The door was locked from the inside. No sign of struggle, no note, nothing. We tore through that town screaming her name. We called the sheriff, an older man named Dunn with one good eye and a permanent scowl. He listened, nodded, then told us she probably just ran off. Teenagers do that, but we knew Jenna. She wouldn't. The next morning we tried to leave. The Jeep wouldn't start. The mechanic in town, a guy named Ezra, said it would take a day or two to get the part. We had no choice but to wait. By nightfall, we noticed something chilling. Jenna's face on a flyer taped to the general store's front window. It was old, faded, but it was her. Same eyes, same scar above her left eyebrow, and the date on it said, missing since 1993. Brandon pulled the flyer down, trembling. What the hell is this? We went back to the motel to grab our things. It was empty, no trace of our stay. Even the registry had no record of us checking in. We stood in the lot, stunned, when a woman across the street approached. She was in her 60s, maybe older, and she stared at the flyer in Brandon's hand. They don't let people leave once they're marked. She whispered, "Who?" Kayla asked. "This town." She said, "It feeds on the ones who stray too far." We didn't wait to hear more. Brandon hotwired the Jeep while I watched the street, my hands trembling. We drove all night, never stopping, never looking back. By dawn, we reached Albuquerque. The moment we crossed out of Azure Springs, it felt like waking up from a nightmare. The Jeep worked fine. Our phones lit up. We were back, but Jenna wasn't. We filed reports. We told the police everything. They searched. They found nothing. The town of Azure Springs, they said, didn't exist. No Desert Palms Lodge, no Sheriff Dunn, no Ezra. Nothing. And yet, in my phone gallery, wedged between two blurry shots of the desert highway, is a photo I don't remember taking. It's of Jenna, standing outside the general store, smiling, with someone's hand resting on her shoulder. Someone who isn't any of us. The morning of May 4th, 2001, started quietly in the one-bedroom apartment Madison Lane shared with her best friend, April Thomas, in Roanoke, Virginia. The two young women had lived together for over a year, comfortably tangled in the semi-chaotic routines of early adulthood. Grocery runs at midnight, heated debates about laundry schedules, and philosophical talks on the porch until dawn. That Friday was nothing special, at least not at first. Madison was supposed to cover April's shift at the bakery on Sunday, and they'd made plans to try a new Vietnamese place the next evening. April remembers watching her friend pad barefoot into the kitchen, bleary-eyed in a sweatshirt, and joke about how she needed caffeine before her brain could legally operate. Nothing seemed off. And yet, by sunset that same day, Madison had packed a suitcase, withdrawn nearly $4,000 from two separate bank accounts, and disappeared into the Blue Ridge twilight, leaving behind only a cryptic note and 100 questions that would never quite find their answers. Madison Lane was born on October 1st, 1978, in Danville, Virginia. She was the youngest of three siblings, two brothers, both older and louder, and the only girl. Her mother, Eleanor, taught literature at the local college, and her father, James, worked long hours in a mechanical shop until an undiagnosed lung disease forced him into early retirement. Madison had always been observant, thoughtful, and drawn to patterns others missed. She wrote poetry in high school that won regional contests, played the cello in a youth orchestra, loved hiking and reading travel memoirs late into the night. But her teenage years were marked by quiet devastation. At 16, her father passed away suddenly in their home. 2 years later, her mother followed, her heart giving out with little warning. By 20, Madison had buried both parents and was left clinging to a cracked sense of self, propped up by her brothers and an increasingly spiritual outlook. She started studying cultural anthropology at Hollins University, where she met April Thomas, a fellow introvert with a biting sense of humor and a love of cinnamon tea. Their bond was instant and unshakable. April would later tell police that there was no warning sign, nothing that screamed, "Watch closely." Madison had even picked up oat milk on her way home, which she hated doing. But just after 6:00 p.m., Madison walked into their shared apartment, set down her keys, and said casually, "Hey, I'm going to take a little trip. Just a few days, I think." April laughed. "To where, Mars?" Madison smiled vaguely, brushing her bangs behind one ear. "Just west. I think I need a reset." "You okay?" April's tone shifted. Yeah, I've been feeling stuck. It's not bad, just foggy. You ever feel like you're waiting for a message you forgot how to read?" April blinked. Not recently." They laughed. Madison packed light. Just a duffel bag, a backpack, her journal, and 2 books. On The Road by Jack Kerouac and a worn, underlined copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. She withdrew $3,880 from her bank accounts in 20s and hundreds. Then she left a handwritten note on the fridge. "April, don't panic. I'm not running away from anything, just towards something I don't know yet. This is just a pause. Remember, everyone we meet is a mirror. Rent's paid. There's pasta in the cabinet. Please water the ficus. I'll be back soon. Mads. P.S. You're the only one who would understand this. Tell Dylan he was right about sunsets in New Mexico." April didn't worry until the 3rd day, when Madison's phone rang straight to voicemail and her social media went silent. She started making calls. By the 5th day, April had reached out to Madison's brother, Ben, who drove down from Richmond that night. Together, they entered Madison's bedroom looking for anything: a receipt, an address, a map. Inside her desk drawer, they found another envelope. It contained $160 in cash, a small silver pendant that had belonged to her mother, and a typed page that read simply, "This journey is mine. Please don't follow. Love is not pursuit, it's trust." It didn't sound like a goodbye, but it didn't sound like a round trip either. Ben contacted the bank. Because he still had limited power of attorney from when Madison had traveled abroad years earlier, he was able to pull her recent financial activity. The record showed a slow drift west. She'd gassed up in Tennessee, stayed at a motel outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, and bought breakfast at a diner in Amarillo, Texas. Each purchase was spaced roughly 6 to 8 hours apart. No erratic behavior, no wild spending. The pattern suggested careful thought. She was on a journey, but toward what? The trail stopped in a town called Espanola, New Mexico. Her last known transaction was a $9.80 purchase at a gas station on May 8th. After that, nothing. On May 17th, 9 days after the Espanola purchase, a couple hiking through the Santa Fe National Forest stumbled across a badly damaged blue Subaru Forester at the base of a rocky incline. The vehicle had clearly rolled, its windshield smashed, front axle twisted, but there was no blood, no signs of injury, no body. Inside the car were a half-eaten bag of trail mix, an empty water jug, Madison's wallet minus cash, her journal pages torn from the spine but still intact, a pair of folded jeans with $600 in the pocket, a movie ticket stub for Waking Life, and in a tiny envelope decorated with pressed flowers, her mother's pendant, carefully placed on the dashboard. Blankets had been draped over the windows, forming a makeshift sleeping area in the back. But the driver's seat belt showed no sign of stress. The airbags hadn't deployed. There was no indication anyone had been inside during the crash. Someone, likely Madison, had sent the car down the slope. The journal was where the emotional riddle began to unravel. Many entries were philosophical reflections on grief, the idea of rebirth, how identity feels more like smoke than stone. But several pages seemed almost like instructions. If you want to disappear, do it with kindness. Do it without anger. Another read, what if the end of the road is just the start of seeing yourself? April and Ben were haunted by those pages. Madison had always been deep, but this was different. It felt final, even if it wasn't a goodbye. There were reports of sightings. A waitress in Taos claimed a woman matching Madison's description had eaten breakfast alone and tipped generously, asking if there were any meditation retreats nearby. Another tip came from a hiker near Ghost Ranch who saw a young woman hiking alone, smiling, carrying a sketchbook. None of the sightings could be confirmed. Then came the most unsettling development. In late 2007, during a cold case review, a new detective named Caroline Rhodes suggested revisiting Madison's vehicle, still impounded in Albuquerque. Under the hood, they found that the engine had been deliberately tampered with, wires rerouted, a crude ignition system created so the car could be sent downhill without a driver, and beneath the hood, fingerprints, not Madison. They were run through databases. No match. Was she alone when she disappeared? Was someone helping her vanish? Or had she trusted the wrong person? One theory posited Madison had hired someone, perhaps from an underground network, to help her disappear. April hated the idea Madison wasn't reckless with trust. Another possibility, she'd joined a monastery or off-grid community. One in New Mexico was only 30 miles from the crash site, but none admitted to knowing her. The darkest theory remains the most painful, that she met someone while on the road, someone she confided in, someone who used her vulnerability against her. But then, why no struggle? Why the care in placing her mother's pendant? Why preserve the journal? 24 years later, Madison Lane is still missing. April keeps her photo on the fridge. Every few years, she gets a call from someone claiming to have seen her in Oregon or Colorado or Arizona. Nothing ever pans out, but she keeps answering the phone. She wouldn't leave forever, April says, unless she thought she was saving us the pain of seeing her break. The Subaru is still in storage. The fingerprints still have no match. And in the deep folds of New Mexico's forests, where the pines grow tall and quiet, some say a woman once passed through thoughtful, gentle, searching for a message she forgot how to read. Maybe she found it, or maybe she's still looking. I never liked long drives at night, but my parents always said it was safer to move when traffic was light, especially across state lines. It was October 2013 when we packed our lives into a dented white Honda Odyssey and left everything we knew behind in Paterson, New Jersey. My parents had had enough of city life, the traffic, the noise, the bills piling up like autumn leaves. My mom, Teresa, wanted space, a garden, a slower pace. My dad, Marcus, who'd served in the army during Desert Storm, just wanted peace, real dead, silent peace. So we were headed for a new start in northern Georgia, a small fixer-upper cottage my dad found through a friend from the VA. It was a long drive, and we couldn't afford plane tickets, not after the rent hike and Dad's second surgery. So we drove, my parents in the front, me and my little sister Ellie in the back, the third row folded down for luggage and groceries we'd boxed up from our pantry. It was a familiar rhythm. Gas stops, restrooms, vending machines, and Ellie's constant humming from her iPod earbuds. Somewhere around 1:20 a.m., we were cutting through the backwoods of West Virginia on Highway 56. Miles of nothing save for cracked road, trees, and mist curling off the ground. That's when it happened. The van slowed down gradually. I felt the drop in momentum before I even opened my eyes. Why are we stopping? I asked, half asleep. There's someone in the road, Dad said flatly. I sat up, and yeah, there was someone lying on their stomach right in the middle of our lane, maybe 40 feet ahead, A woman, it looked like, wearing a maroon sweater. Her black hair was matted, maybe wet. She wasn't moving. Shit. My mom breathed. Stay in the car. Dad said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Don't open the doors. Lock them now. Marcus. My mom began. Teresa, lock them. The click of the locks made the van feel like a cage. Dad stepped out slowly. He always moved like a soldier when things got tense. Smooth, alert, controlled. He had a flashlight clipped to his belt, and one hand near the glove he kept in his back pocket. I didn't like how deliberate he was. He crouched beside her. I saw him touch her back, then gently roll her onto her side. The way he snapped back. I'll never forget that motion, like someone had hit him in the gut. He turned, ran back, jumped in the car, and floored the gas. I screamed as the van swerved around her body and we sped past. Dad, I shouted, what the hell happened? Don't look back. He said, his knuckles white on the wheel. But I did look, and I saw her face. God help me, I saw her face. It was wrong. Her mouth was open too wide. Her jaw hung as if dislocated, off to the side like a marionette cut loose. One eye was bulging, and her right arm was twisted behind her like it had been pulled out of socket. It didn't look like she had fallen. It looked like she'd been placed there, and just beside her, a blue 5. Pointed star, spray-painted, bright crisp edges on the black asphalt. I didn't say anything after that. None of us did for at least 2 hours. Ellie was dead silent. She hadn't seen anything, thank God, but Mom kept looking at Dad, whispering, what did you see? He wouldn't answer. At the next open town, Bridgeford, we stopped at a diner. It was about 4:15 a.m. There was a cop eating breakfast at the counter. My dad pulled him aside, and they talked for nearly half an hour while me and Mom waited in a booth with lukewarm coffee. I saw the cop's expression change during the talk, less skeptical, more focused. He called someone, took notes, but we never heard anything again. No one followed up. We reached Georgia by that afternoon, unloaded, unpacked, and tried to settle into our new life. But the image stayed, that contorted face, the blue star. 2 months later, I was scrolling Reddit late at night while pretending to do homework. I was deep into a thread about urban legends and obscure crime scenes when something caught my eye. Someone had posted a picture of a blue star spray, painted on the trunk of a tree. Caption, saw this on a hike near Kingsley Forest. Weird symbol. Anyone know what it means? The replies were chaotic. Some joked it was a trail marker. Others weren't so sure. One comment chilled me. That's the same star people keep finding near those missing hiker spots. Some say it's connected to the star killers. Star killers, that's what they were calling them. Theorists in the thread went deeps. Smiley face killer comparisons, theories about cults that marked bodies, satanic symbolism, alien abductions. One even claimed there was a private forum where these stars were tracked across the U.S. But to me, it wasn't some internet creepypasta. It was real. I'd seen it. That woman on Highway 56 was no urban legend. I showed my dad the post. He stared at the photo for a long time, then quietly said, "That's the same kind of paint. Same style. Do you think it's a group?" I asked. He didn't answer. The topic became taboo. We never talked about it again. Mom burned the sweater Dad had worn that night. Ellie never asked questions, but sometimes she'd come into my room at night and whisper, "Did we run someone over?" I told her no, that we tried to help. It wasn't our fault. We moved again a year later, another town farther from the woods. My parents said the house was too small, but I think they just wanted to leave the memory behind. To this day, there's been no news about Highway 56. No body recovered, no arrests. I don't even know if the woman's name was ever released. Maybe she had no ID. Maybe she was never reported missing. But I still see that face in my dreams. And every once in a while, I'll check that same Reddit thread and find another photo. Another blue star, different state, different place, same symbol. If anyone out there knows anything about them, please tell someone, post it, share it, before they mark someone you love next. I don't take many trips, but when I do, I make them count. That winter in 2011, I decided to drive up from a small town near Charleston, South Carolina, to visit an old friend, Caleb, who had recently transferred to a college up in Indiana. We hadn't seen each other since graduation, and with the semester ending and the roads clearer than usual, I figured, why not? I wasn't rich, I wasn't flying, and to be honest, I preferred the road. There's something about long drives, your music, your thoughts, just the hum of tires rolling over concrete. It gives you time to think, time to breathe. Caleb was one of the few people I'd stayed close to over the years, the kind of guy who never bailed when things got tough. When I lost my mom 2 years earlier, he'd sat with me outside the hospital in the freezing cold until I was ready to face the world again. People like that are rare. So, I took some time off from my job at the machine shop, packed up a couple bags, filled up the tank, and set off early one December morning. The first half of the trip went smooth. The sky was overcast but dry. I made good time through North Carolina and Tennessee, even stopped at a few scenic pull-offs in the Smokies to take photos for Caleb. He always loved the mountains. It was around 3:15 p.m. when I crossed into southern Kentucky. I remember because I looked at the dashboard clock just as I noticed my stomach growling. I hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. A blue sign on the side of I-65 said there was a rest stop coming up, exit 201, and a small diner or store just off the ramp. Perfect, I thought. I pulled off the interstate and followed the old two-lane road for about half a mile. That's when I saw it. It was eerie how empty everything was. No cars, no noise, just a small cracked parking lot and an old gas station with an attached store. One of those independent ones with faded signage, half the letters missing. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Even the air felt still. I parked near the pumps, got out and stretched. The wind had picked up, and a cold snap cut right through my jacket. As I walked up to the glass door of the store, I noticed immediately that it was locked. Inside was just dust, overturned metal shelves, and some broken glass scattered near the counter. One of the fluorescent lights overhead was still flickering, even though there was no one around. Guess that's a no, I muttered to myself. Just as I turned back toward my car, something caught my eye, movement behind the building. It was subtle, a quick flick of motion like someone peeking. I paused, squinting toward the back corner of the structure. A figure slowly stepped out, halfway in shadow. It was a man, mid-40s maybe, unshaven, wearing an old denim jacket, dark jeans and boots. His clothes were dirty but layered, as if he'd been out in the cold for a while. I raised my hand and gave a polite wave, trying not to seem alarmed. He just stared, didn't move, didn't respond, just watched me with this dull, unreadable expression. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing slightly. "Just passing through, I'm leaving now." The man slowly stepped back behind the building without saying a word. I stood there for a second, unsettled. Something in me whispered, "Leave now." I got back in my car quickly and locked the doors. As I started it up, I gave one last glance in the rear-view mirror. Nothing. Back on the road, I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just squatting there. Maybe he thought I was trouble. Maybe he was afraid. Still, I couldn't ignore the cold feeling crawling under my skin. 20 minutes later, that cold feeling turned into full-blown dread. I was cruising around 65 mph when I heard a sound, a screech followed by a sudden vibration. The car started to fishtail slightly. I gripped the wheel, slowed down, and pulled onto the shoulder. Cursing under my breath, I stepped out and circled around the car, all 4 tires slashed, every single one. I froze. This wasn't road debris. These tires were thick Michelins, barely 6 months old. I'd driven over broken glass before and barely gotten a puncture. This was deliberate. I looked around. Nothing but open highway and trees. No other vehicles, no houses. Someone had done this while I was at that station, and I hadn't even heard a thing. I climbed back in the car, locked the doors, and dialed 911. My heart was racing, and my breath was fogging up the inside of the windshield. The dispatcher was calm, asked for my location, said they'd send a trooper and a tow. I waited 30 minutes, then 45. No cars passed me during that time, not one. The officer finally arrived. An older guy, kind eyes. He took one look at my tires and immediately frowned. "Looks like someone took a knife to these," he said. "You stop anywhere?" I nodded. There was an old station off exit 201. I thought it might have food. It looked abandoned. He stopped writing and looked up. "You said exit 201, yeah? That place hasn't been operational in, 6 years?" he said, mostly to himself. Locals used to call it the last pump. Had a weird reputation. Guy who owned it died under strange circumstances. Couple vagrants used to camp back there, but last I heard they cleared him out. I told him about the man I saw, the stare, the silence. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared out at the trees. The tow arrived, and we rode back to a small shop in a nearby town called Harwell. The mechanic was nice enough, said he could get new tires fitted by evening. I waited in the cramped waiting room, eyes on the dusty TV in the corner, but my mind kept going back to that man. He'd watched me, knew I'd be distracted, had slashed my tires while I was just feet away. What if I'd stayed longer? What if he hadn't wanted me to leave? By the time the car was ready, it was dark out. I drove the rest of the way to Indiana without stopping again, stomach growling the whole time. I didn't care. I just wanted to get there. Caleb was shocked when I told him what happened. So was everyone else I've told since. Most people say it was probably just some deranged squatter, someone looking for a chance to rob me or worse. But some say that station has a story, that it draws people in, that others have stopped there, and not all of them got back on the road. I don't know what that man's plan was. I don't want to, but I do know this. I never stop at abandoned gas stations anymore. And if I ever see someone watching me from the shadows again, I won't wave.